Excellent. And I'm coordinated with Shlomo because he's now sharing his screen. I'm really pleased that Shlomo, the national organizer coordinator of UK Win, is with us and is your space, Shlomo, to tell us more about waste incineration and the alternatives.
Great, thank you very much, Clara. Well, I'll start off just by letting people know that if there's anything that they're interested in that I haven't covered in the presentation, we can hopefully get to it in the Q&A. And whatever we don't get to this evening, I'm here happy to field any questions and happy to enter into discussions with individuals as well as local groups, etc. So this is a first opportunity for many of you, but certainly not the last opportunity for anyone. So this is a presentation that Josh and I got together specially for tonight. It begins with explaining, let me see if I can, okay, good. A bit about who UK Win, what UK Win is about. So the United Kingdom Without Incineration Network was founded in 2007 with support from Friends of the Earth. It's the only UK-wide network supporting local anti-incineration campaigns and lone campaigners. We're currently working with about 50 local groups, some of whom are represented here in this evening's session. With our members, we've helped to prevent more than 100 incinerators from going ahead, and we're aspiring to bring an end to any new incineration capacity. And then we'll begin with the incineration exit strategy to begin to reduce the number of incinerators in the UK. We work to inform the waste and resource policies, so we take part in public consultations, we meet with representatives from the government and from the Environment Agency. We do a lot of work countering greenwash. Obviously, there's big money involved, and that means that there are vested interests. And so some of what is put forward is not accurate information. It is designed to win people over, but it can be debunked, as it were. We maintain a website, which the URL is there, and also it's available in the chat facility. And on that website, we include a lot of information, accurate sourced information, including about existing operational incinerators and also about the reasons why we oppose incineration. And we have a lot of advice and guidance on the website about how to run a campaign and learning lessons from successful campaigns and so forth. So I wanted to start this evening by talking a bit about climate greenwash. And I've provided an example here from a company, an American-based company that are looking to expand into the UK, Covanta. And you can see even just the childlike drawings, and generally speaking, they're trying to create an impression of being friendly and accessible. And they're using words like sustainable and renewable, which obviously upsets me to see those words being misused. They talk about energy from waste turning trash into power. So how does waste suddenly convert into energy? What is this mysterious process? Well, as simply as we can put it, through combustion, oxygen in the air combines with carbon in the material that is being incinerated to produce CO2. The reaction releases heat, which is used to generate energy. So the heat often is used to heat water, which then turns it into steam, which then powers a turbine, and it's the turbine that creates the energy. It's an inefficient process. Generally speaking, incinerators operate at something in the region of 18 to 23 if we're generous, 25% efficiency, which means that 3/4 of the calorific value, 3/4 of the heat of the feedstock is lost, so to speak. CO2 emissions come from the burning of the carbon content of the waste, which is exactly what creates the energy. So there's no way to create energy without burning the carbon. So the CO2 from sources like food, paper, and wood are considered short cycle or biogenic carbon, and the energy generated from burning food, paper, and wood is considered renewable by the government, and so it contributes to the government's renewable energy targets. Of course, it isn't renewable in the same way that naturally occurring sun, wind, waves, etc. are renewable. Nevertheless, in order to meet their targets, the government considers the biogenic portion renewable, but nobody supports the idea of burning plastic. And yet that is a fair proportion of what is relied upon to create the energy. Plastic is fossil-based, it's made from petroleum products, and therefore it is a fossil fuel. So if anyone is arguing that incineration is a good replacement for fossil fuels, actually incineration is an example of relying on a fossil fuel in the form of the plastics in the feedstock. So if we look at this chemical reaction, 1 ton of mixed waste is made up of, on average, about 27% carbon. When that burns, 1 ton of carbon dioxide is released. Roughly half of that is from fossil sources and the other half is from biogenic. And because it's mixed waste and because it's not exclusively waste wood, or that would be a biomass plant, then it is described as partially renewable energy. If we look more closely at the plastic content, dense, that is hard plastics, are roughly 55% carbon. So when 1 ton of dense plastic is burnt or incinerated, 2 tons of carbon dioxide, 2 tons of CO2 is released into the atmosphere. And again, a bit of non-renewable energy is created in that instance. So it's fair to say that incineration as a source of energy is a very high carbon source of energy. And what I've done here is I've drawn from the work that Josh has carried out. We, of course, onshore wind and solar panels don't release any CO2 in their operation, but rather than zero rating them, we describe them here based on the CO2 that is released in their construction, which we don't do for the incinerators, but it's just to provide a bit of a comparator. BEIS is the government department for business, energy and industrial strategy. And they are looking to decarbonize the energy grid. So what they are saying is that in the future, not the distant future, and by 2025, they want to see the energy feeding into the grid on average 205 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. That is the carbon intensity of the energy. For last year, the intention was for the carbon intensity to be about 258 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. Combined cycle gas turbines, in other words, so-called natural gas, again, another greenwash phrase to describe it as natural gas, produces energy releasing somewhere between 340 and 360 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, and that is the conventional use of fossil fuel. If we move on, the Corey Riverside incinerator in London, in Bexley, when they were applying for a new incinerator, they claimed back in 2017 that the energy they would be producing would be 617 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. But the reality is that when we compare those claims with the actual operational facilities, we see that the Beddington incinerator in London, the Runcorn incinerator in Cheshire, the Ardley incinerator, etc., release more in the neighborhood of 800 to 900 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. So you can see that that is 4 times the carbon intensity that the government is looking for from energy in the grid. So it's not surprising, therefore, that the adverse climate impacts of waste incineration are attracting increasing attention, including attention from the Climate Change Committee, who in 2020 informed government that there was a need for a step change towards a circular economy, moving away from landfill and incineration because of the climate impacts. There are many good reasons to move away from landfill and incineration, not only climate reasons, but obviously that's the focus of the Climate Change Committee. If we move on to try to understand how we've got to where we are now, we've got a section of the presentation called The Rise and Fall of Incineration. This describes the rise. So back at the turn of the century, relatively little waste was incinerated, and to be fair, relatively little was being recycled. Most of it was going to landfill. And through a combination of factors, including the UK government and including the European Union, there was a desire to move away from landfill. And so the UK government introduced a landfill tax and also introduced waste PFI contracts that allowed for some government funding to support the building of new waste incinerators. And the number of waste incinerators increased, and the percentage of waste sent for incineration has grown and grown over the last 2 decades, reaching approximately 50% of the local authority collected waste that is going for incineration, outstripping the percentage going for recycling. So we look now at the impact of incineration on recycling. And so this is a snapshot. It changes year to year. And you can see the way that it crosses over, showing that those local authorities, and we've done this by region, we've also got information by local authority, but those regions that are incinerating the least, unsurprisingly, are recycling the most. And conversely, those areas with very poor recycling rates have very high rates of incineration. So don't believe the industry greenwash when they say that incineration and recycling exist alongside each other quite comfortably. Press them on, if someone says that to you, press them on what do they mean by high rates of high rates of recycling. Because if the recycling rates are below 65%, that doesn't count as high rates of recycling. And logically, if a local authority is achieving a 65% recycling rate, then they won't be able to incinerate more than 30% of their waste, because some material goes to landfill because it's neither recyclable nor combustible. So this gives you a sense that in areas where there's high incineration, there tends to be lower recycling. Further evidence about the adverse impact that incineration has on recycling has been provided by Unison. So there's a report from November 2021 written by Unison, or written on, I think, commissioned by Unison. And it includes in the introduction the following quote. It says, while EFW, energy from waste, a euphemism for incineration, is often promoted as an environmentally friendly alternative to landfilling, it often ends up discouraging waste prevention as well as recycling. So landfills can quite happily sit there and not receive waste. So landfill is, in a sense, scalable. Incinerators need to operate more or less at capacity, sometimes a bit below, sometimes actually a bit above. But the incinerators can't be switched on and off. So if there's less waste, then there's less waste going to landfill. If there's more waste, then more waste can be recycled. But with incineration, they have to maintain a high level of input for the facility to work properly. And most of what is sent for incineration is actually recyclable. 55% not of waste arising, but of the residual waste altogether. So not the total waste, but just the waste that isn't recycled. 55% of that could and should be recycled. 75% could be readily recycled or potentially recyclable. And nearly 92% could be recycled or substituted with another material. So, and that data is from the government, it's from DEFRA, and it is worth quoting. Another thing that is worth taking into account is that the government has a target, a draft target at the moment, upon which they are consulting, to halve the quantities of residual waste arising. So the residual waste is described as potential incinerator feedstock. Roughly 90% of it is combustible. And at the moment, that sits at around 22 million tons. If it is halved based on a sort of steady reduction, then that would amount to some 13 million tons of residual waste in 2042. If we use those same numbers, the 13.3 and the 22.3 figures there, that's the potential incinerator feedstock. There's already more than 16 million tons of operational capacity for incinerators. This doesn't take into account cement kilns or MBT plants or landfill. That's just incineration capacity. In addition to that, there's roughly a further 4 million tons that is under construction, and a further 2.5 or so million tons that has planning permission but doesn't yet have a permit. So if all of that were built, we would already be in a situation of overcapacity where there's more incineration capacity than there is feedstock to burn. And so that's why we're calling for a moratorium now. Hopefully that moratorium will be introduced soon, and for England along the lines of Wales and Scotland. And hopefully that moratorium would capture all of the incinerators that have planning permission but do not yet have an environmental permit, and those incinerators that are currently in the planning system. So you may be aware, recently Greenpeace called for an immediate moratorium on new incineration capacity, and this is how they framed it. The government must follow Scotland and Wales and end approvals for new incineration facilities and prevent replacement or upgrade of old plants, i.e. refurbishment, that are near retirement, for example, in Birmingham, in order to support an overall reduction in waste incineration. The Welsh government has a moratorium that they introduced in the name of moving towards the circular economy. The Scottish government described their moratorium as action taken to encourage a circular economy. So incineration is the old way of doing things. The circular economy is the future. What do we mean by that? Well, these graphics show what we mean by a linear economy, sometimes called take, make, destroy, where material is raw materials are excavated, etc. There's a manufacturing process. They are used for a while and then they are discarded. In a circular economy, unnecessary packaging is reduced. The lifespan of products is increased, and the products themselves are designed to be more easily reused or indeed recycled or composted. So in answer to the question, what are the alternatives? There's a very clearly defined high-level concept for the alternative, which is the circular economy. In relation to alternatives to incineration, we can learn from other countries and other cities around the world that are doing away with incineration. The way they do it is they invest in education, in waste reduction efforts, in reuse parks, so that there's an obvious place for people to go and send something that has the potential to be reused, or indeed to go to shop for something in the first instance and pick up a second-hand settee or something like that. More sorting is important, as well as obviously promoting recycling. So there's already moves afoot that will reduce the quantity of waste arising, and that is part of the alternatives to incineration as well. This slide will be available to you after the presentation. We'll circulate it, so you don't need to take notes as such. But I do want to make one more point, and as we're meeting up here with trade unionists, obviously employment is important. Incineration is a job killer. A recent study that was commissioned by the Mayor of London showed that for every 10,000 tons of waste that is prevented, one job in incineration is lost, and 386 jobs in the circular economy are created. So this gives you a sense of how incineration is basically a job killer. So we may return to this slide later in the discussions, but in terms of what you can do to support the anti-incineration movement, that includes supporting a motion through your union calling for a moratorium. And as a guideline, you can use the draft that Clara produced. You can support the national campaign by joining the UK Win email list and our discussion group if you're particularly keen. You can support your local campaign. So UK Win runs a map and table that shows where the existing incinerators are, where the potential incinerators are, where the incinerators that have been refused permission are, and you can look there to see what is your nearest incinerator and help out with the local campaign. There's an opportunity at the moment to sign a Greenpeace petition, and I've given you the link there. And if you want me to deliver a presentation along these lines and to take questions, etc., to any union branch meeting, etc., I'm very happy to do so. So those are some examples of the sorts of things that you can do. What I'm going to do now is stop sharing the screen and hand back to Clara, who can sort of move us forward towards our Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Shlomo, for all this information, and you will get a copy of the presentation and the recording as well. I'm actually going to jig things a little bit around because, Shlomo, you've gone over your time, but that's okay because it's really important information. But maybe while people think a little bit about if they've got any questions for Shlomo, I really want to hear from some of the live campaigners, make sure we've got enough time to hear from their voices. So if that's okay, I'm going to bring Paul in, from the northeast, Stop Incineration Northeast scene. And then it will be Malcolm who is going to also share the screen. So Malcolm, I'll give you like a couple of minutes to be ready while Paul makes the contribution. Yeah, Paul, do you want to tell us about your campaign?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I'd like to thank Shlomo and UK Wind for all the backing and support they've given us alongside Rakesh at Tipping Point, who you probably know, Clara. So we feel well supported, and we've got a safe pair of hands behind us. Anyway, we're currently opposing the building of the Monster Tees Valley Incinerator, or TWERF as it's known, Tees Valley Energy Recovery Facility. There are 7 local authorities involved in this Northeast project, from which 450,000 tonnes per annum of domestic and commercial waste will be taken to be burnt at a site near Grangetown in Redcar and Cleveland, a deprived area which has borne the brunt of the pollution from the heavy steel and chemical industries for decades, as well as already having functioning incinerators nearby. 2 main campaign spikes we are leading. Firstly, a leafleting campaign in Grangetown, then nearby in Dormanstown, who will be the worst affected. Practically no one anywhere knows about this project, and it seems to be a well-kept secret behind closed doors. In conjunction with Friends of the Earth Darlington, we at Sign, we built a mock incinerator, which has taken our Stop the Burn protest to Darlington Carnival, which we managed to crash, and Newcastle in conjunction with XR a couple of weeks ago on an oil tour of the city, fossil fuel tour. And we'll be in Middlesbrough on Saturday, and in at the Hartlepool Carnival in 2 weeks' time on Saturday the 30th, I believe. Sorry, no, that's not. But it's two Saturdays' time. We also have other events for which we're planning for this summer. We recently did a press release which appeared in the Northern Echo, and we're kind of just really starting to get things moving along. So anyway, I can actually just quickly show you one of our leaflets. This was done for the Darlington Carnival, and this is going to be targeted locally, and we're going to produce another one for the 7 authorities. And I believe, Malcolm, you'll tell us that you've got 7 authorities as well lined up. Anyway, I'm going to get off now. That gives us a shelling out of our campaign.
Thanks so much, Paul. And I've shared the Facebook page for the campaign. We'll circulate it. But also, if you've got an event coming up, we'll be able to circulate it to trade unionists. We're going to make sure that we help your campaign to carry on the great work you're doing to stop that incinerator. And I see Shlomo is raising his hand, but no, you've spoken too much already, Shlomo.
I just wanted to let everyone here know that UK Win has a fund to support the production and printing of leaflets, etc. So if you like, basically any expenses that your campaign might incur, please get in touch with us, because as I say, we can sometimes make funds available to support you.
Excellent. That's great. Okay, now we're gonna hear from another great campaign that there's been a lot of publicity, a lot of activity around. So Malcolm, are you ready to share your screen? And you'll have to unmute yourself as well at the meantime.
Okay, so are you going to put the slides up for me, or do I have to do it myself?
But we just tried before you started. So you go at the bottom of your screen, you go on share screen, and then you will be able to do so.
Oh yeah.
It's okay. No stress. We'll just wait for you to be able to do it.
Okay. I don't know where it is now.
So you go at the bottom to share screen, and you have this little drop-down menu, you said, and then you click on share screen. but you also need to make sure that your presentation is actually open. If not, you won't be able to share it.
All right.
In the meantime, if you've got questions for Shlomo, you can also like share them in the chat.
Yes.
You're struggling, Michael.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the presentation. It's disappeared.
Is it open on your computer? Excellent. You've got it. It's
No,
coming up.
I
It's
haven't.
coming up.
No.
Oh, it's the wrong one, so you need to stop sharing.
Oh God.
All right.
Okay, there we are. Yeah.
You need to stop sharing because you shared the wrong window. You shared the Word document. If you go back to the bottom of your screen and say stop sharing, or it may be at the top of your screen.
Stop share, yeah.
Yeah. And then make sure the only other window you've got open is your presentation rather than the Word document. And then do the process again, and we should get the right screen. And, you know, like when you do that in front of everybody, it's like really stressful. So just, you know, don't worry about it. We'll take the time we need because we did it before we started. So. Okay. Try again.
Okie doke.
Yeah, we've got the correct one. And you can click from the beginning at the top left of your screen. And then you can use your arrows to move forward when you need to. The floor is yours.
So I'm Malcolm from Stop the Edmonton Incinerator Now campaign. We had an action at the Crown Dale Centre, Camden, which is one of the 7 boroughs of the North London Waste Authority, which was disrupted spectacularly by a group of singers and so on, drummers from XR. Now, you know, you should be able to see on that poster, it talks about environmental racism. So that's what I've been asked to talk about here. There's just bullet points. You'll get this document, so I'll just summarize them. So environmental racism extends basically from the global north, within the global north, and North London as Edmonton, Enfield. The campaign started as an activist group in 2015, discredited North London Waste Authority and Rambo PR team, claimed to have leafleted 250,000 homes, which is nonsense. Those closest to the incinerator. The 7 boroughs consist of 2.1 million people in the 7 boroughs, as you can see. The Edmonton incinerator was, I think it was quite possibly the first one in the whole country, but it was built in 1969 as a sort of as the new thing, which it clearly isn't now. It's being rebuilt massively with massive overcapacity. So it's been increased in size, and the building work started on that already. It also runs an inefficient local heating network, Energetic, and that's looking to expand as well. So I'll go on to the next. So I mean, you'll know this, that the pollution is horrendous, and over the 50+ years that this incinerator has been chucking out poison and pollution over our communities, it just makes me angry. So we'll move on to the next one. It's planned to be replaced because it's so polluting. Edmonton and the surrounding area in Enfield here is a poorer, blacker area. It's not a whiter, rich area where most of the campaigns that have succeeded have succeeded. So the Enfield Eco Park project hasn't been in the public domain until 2015 when they delivered these leaflets. Thankfully, somebody in Waltham Forest decided to start the campaign. Before that, none of us knew anything about it at all, and most people still don't. So we've done letter writing, petitions, Street Council, deputations, disruptions, banners and leaflet protests. We've had coverage in the national and local press, and all the residents that you talk to, once they have the information, are against it. So obviously we're backing the campaign with Aquin for a moratorium now in England and Northern Ireland. So the local activists have been joined by XR, People's Assembly, Stop the Oil, Black Lives Matter, Unite Community. They're the main ones. I haven't left anyone out. It's a loosely assembled single issue, but global in scope. And the activists include trade unions, Green and Lib Dem members, and now a couple of members in Haringey have started, perhaps, to move the discussions on from "we're not listening to you, there's no alternative," etc. So we've done various actions. I wouldn't say disorganised, but it's not. You know, we're not like an army. You know, we're just people that come together on a WhatsApp page. If anyone has a bright idea as to something to do, then you know they put that idea out there, and it happens, and it's been really successful. So the aims are to stop the Edmonton incinerator now, the existing one, and don't build a new one. Moratorium for England and Northern Ireland, and my view really is that the main issue is overcapacity, because the London Waste Management Plan is probably is just overcapacity. It's just obvious, right? So government and councils, I can't read all this, but are knowingly culpable because we've given the information. The company that is that's just been, the contract has just been signed off, Axionia and HZL, they're a cartel basically. They have a record of global corporate financial and political fraud, corruption, money laundering, political party payoffs, public-private contracts unfulfilled, using dirty labour and PR tactics. And I'll just give you a handful of links there to kind of cover that what might seem to be a wild and unsubstantiated claim, but it isn't. And it's just horrendous to think that our councillors, knowing this information, signed off to release public funds to start this, to start building the new incinerator in Edmonton. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Michael, so much. And if you can now stop sharing your screen as well, so we're just like back to conversation. Okay, thanks so much. I'm wondering if anybody had like any questions before we try to have a bit of a discussion space. We've got, maybe like 5-10 minutes max to have a few questions. So was there like anything in particular? Okay, I can see Giovanna raising her hand on the screen. So would you like to ask your question? And also you can use the electronic hand if you'd like to ask a question.
Okay, I've got two questions that I think just require short answers. One is for Shlomo. When you talk about dense plastic emitting 2 tons of CO2 approximately, could you just give me, I'm a bit dense and like as the plastic, but I'd just like some examples of what dense plastic might look like in a bag of rubbish, you know, what sort of items you mean. That would be quite useful. And for the gentleman that just spoke, sorry, I've lost Malcolm. I just want, did you say that Just Stop Oil have joined in with your campaign? Is it Just Stop Oil? That's what I wanted to know. Thank you. It is, thank you.
Yeah, so it is. I'm going to bring Shlomo back in to answer your question about dense, but I'm going to look at, is there any other like sort of technical questions that you've got? And I see TT.
Yeah, I was wondering how many companies are we dealing with here? Is it the same is it one big company that's doing all these incinerators, or is it a whole range of?
It is a whole range, but you know, I'll let Shlomo come back. Anybody else? I can't see many hands, which is actually good. But
Bill also put forward a question in the chat, so we can cover that one as well.
You want to read it loud because I didn't see that. I must have missed it.
Yep. I mean, we can let Bill sort of develop it because it was kind of written in shorthand, but it was a question for Shlomo about discussing the use of existing incinerators and also beyond CO2, talking about air pollution. But I wanted to start by responding to Gio's question about dense plastic. So very simply put, if a piece of plastic can be crunched in your hand and then it pops open again, that is plastic film, and that's the sort of thing that supermarkets are now accepting for what I would describe as downcycling, where they melt it and put it through a protrusion process and turn it into garden furniture. But anything that is hard, so a plastic milk bottle, for example, that is dense plastic. Really, it's anything that doesn't, that isn't, I mean, that's right, exactly, that isn't squishable into, I mean, a lot of the plastic film or thin, if you like, non-dense plastic will be things like crisp packets, which although they're silver, they're not metal, that's plastic, and carrier bags, etc. That's not dense plastic. Whereas sort of household items that are made from plastic, plastic bins and plastic toys and all the rest of it, that is dense plastic. So hopefully that answers your question. In relation to TT's question about the number of firms involved, there are a lot of different levels to it. So first of all, there are about half a dozen multinational corporations that dominate the market. And so your Veolias, your Cita Suezes, your Bifas, those are companies that run several different incinerators. Sometimes you have foreign countries. I mean, Veolia is a French-based. It used to be the one of the, in fact, both Veolia and Cita Suez used to be water companies in France, and then they expanded to and changed their name several times. But so there are some companies that run a higher proportion of the incinerators. There are a small number of new entrants, but it's not easy to break into the market, etc. But then there are even fewer companies that are involved in the construction of incinerators. There may only be 2 or 3 companies that have a track record of building incinerators. So there are a lot of different names, but actually it's a smaller field than we might have imagined in terms of what are we up against. We're up against a relatively small number of very big companies, But because those companies know that in order to make a profit from their incinerators, they need sufficient feedstock, because a lot of the money that they earn is by charging gate fees per ton. And because they know that there's less and less feedstock, most of the current planning applications for incinerators are being put forward by new entrants rather than by existing multinational corporations. So in a sense, quietly, those companies are already abandoning incineration for other money-making ventures. And what's left are those companies that have themselves fallen for industry greenwash and think that they can make some money after the party's really over. And then
I'm just gonna, because I still want us to have a little discussion space, and you know, the presentations have been like longer with a lot of information. I know like Bill has had an additional question about, you know, air pollution and more details, but maybe that's something that you'll be able to like follow up separately. So we still got some time for the breakout rooms. Is that okay? Was there like any urgent like question that, you know, we're burning? But I think it'd be quite good if we move on to the breakout space for a moment. Is that okay?
That's fine with me, Clara. It'd be very good to communicate with Bill